welcome. We're back for a new year with Whiteline Fever Kicks. Thanks for joining us, everybody. And before I introduce our guest, if you're listening on the podcast, don't forget to subscribe through iTunes. And if you are watching on YouTube, there's a little button down there that says subscribe. So make sure you hit that. And don't forget to support us on Patreon, patreon.com/Whiteline Fever. Easy to remember. Okay, our first guest for the year is someone I met through Shane Richardson many years ago. And he's, I mean, how do I describe him? I could take up the whole episode trying to introduce him. So I'll let him introduce himself. But his name's Allan Cooper. He lives in California, and he's been an expat Aussie in the US since the end of the 80s. Happy New Year, Allan. How are you, mate?
G'day, mate. Happy New Year. Nice to see 2020 roll over.
Yeah.
An interesting start to it already out here in California. Yeah,
I was going to start with that. As an Australian living in, the journalist in me can't help but be topical at every turn. As an Australian living in the US as an expat, you've been there a long time now. What are your thoughts on the events at the Capitol in the last 24 hours?
It's astounding. I'm a little bit of a history fan, and it's the first time since 1814 that the Capitol building has been invaded, and it was the British that did it in the War of 1812, mate. So to see that happen by Americans storming their own Capitol building and the chaos that was created, it's incomprehensible. I don't know what to say, because if America can't protect their Capitol building from the citizens, what else can you hope for? So stunned, absolutely stunned, as the whole country is and the world is. I mean, looking at the comments of some of the previous presidents, be it Republican or Democratic, it shows the neutrality of where it is with their concerns for the leadership of the country. So I think everybody's looking forward to just a peaceful handover, and let's get it started. Let's get the bullshit behind us. It's been divisive. It's been fracturing. It's been an amazing 35 years I've lived here, but this last 12 months is by far just indescribable for so many reasons.
Allan, you've sort of made your name in many areas, the automotive industry, but as far as sport is concerned, rugby league, rugby union, and cricket, over New Year's you found yourself riding 160 miles in 2 days. Do you want to tell us why you did that? What's the story you made there? Talking about the news, you're in the LA Times, I think. Or one was it the LA Times? One of the local papers, one of the LA papers, anyway, for your efforts. What was that all about?
Yeah, it's the LA Times organization. Yeah, so look, I mean, just the full disclosure here, mate. 2020's been a watershed year for me. Going through a divorce, started a business at the beginning of COVID, my third one out here in the digital space, and we obviously got crushed with that. But it's still growing. But just everything's been stalled out. We're one of those sectors that have been hurt with it, and so it's been challenging. And got to the end of the year, and it's Christmas. I got a house with no furniture that all disappeared one weekend when I was away on a trip, and no one around. I had a couple of mates that reached out. Some really good old neighbours having me over for Christmas dinner at their house. Caught up with my godson for the first time in a while, but Christmas morning I woke up and I went, shit. The world's in chaos, and I'm sitting here in Newport Beach in California, and it's life's good. I mean, I've got a roof over my head. What have I got to be sorry about? And 12 years ago, I met Steve Waugh in a random situation out here on a fishing boat, and didn't know each other. Started chatting about stuff. Found out we had a mutual friend in Jim Tucker. Through his cricketing days of covering stories, and one thing led to another that I introduced Steve to a couple of people about his charity, and we became friends. And 2015 he had a bike ride called the Captain's Ride that was to raise funds for the Steve Waugh Foundation for kids with rare diseases, and so I became involved in it and did a couple of them over the years. I'm not a cyclist, I never have been, but I love the camaraderie and how it helped me at a couple of pivotal times in my own life. And I went back to that on Christmas morning and said, jump on a bike and just let's put some awareness to some charities that are dear to my heart. And obviously Steve Waugh is with the foundation, been part of that from the beginning with fundraising. I decided to do my own little captain's ride down the coast from Santa Barbara, Newport Beach, because captain's ride was cancelled in Australia this year, like a lot of sporting events. And then I looked at if I could pull in a little bit of amplification of the messaging through other charities that are topical to the US. So I got friends with the Johnny Mack Foundation, which is Kids for Education who've lost parents to the wars, and service here. Feeding America, always been involved with the food bank since I've been here. And then the Concussion Legacy Foundation, which is all about CTE disease and concussions. And given my footballing past as an amateur, both at cricket and rugby, union and league, knocked out 6 times and dozens of concussions, I believe that I'm probably affected with it. So I've donated my brain when I pass away to be harvested and to do a little research. And so that was the genesis, mate. I woke up on Christmas morning like, kick yourself into gear, go and get comfortable being uncomfortable, and do this ride. And not fit, didn't have a bike, bought a bike on Boxing Day from a local realty called REI, and made a couple of phone calls to see if I could get a car behind me to chase me because of safety on the roads. I mean, this is not the place to be riding a bike by yourself, or even in a pack without a SAG car. And so that happened, and that's what I did. Did it over 2 days. Screwed up, left my gear behind at the house the night before. I had to drive back from Santa Barbara, so I did 540 miles in 12 hours. And then the next morning, I needed more rest, so I didn't get up at 7 o'clock. I got up at 10 o'clock and finally left Santa Barbara at 12:30 and made it to Point Magoo State Beach at sunset, which was about 50, 60 miles, which meant I had to knock off 100 miles the next day. So I thought, well, I can do that. I mean, it's pretty flat. I mean, so it was a big undertaking from, an elevation climb or things like that, and getting used to changing gears and clip-ins, and kicked off at 10:30 and I got to Newport Beach at 7:30 at night with a very slight 20-minute lunch in Malibu with my dentist, who happened to be there celebrating his 60th birthday. So that was the only physical contact I had with people around COVID. And he's a dentist, so we're all very much the 6 degrees of separation. 6 feet of separation. But from a social comment, to just say it to you, mate, I mean, riding the coast and seeing the encampments of new homeless, under freeway passes and in Santa Monica, and there's just this turmoil that is out there, and the sadness that I saw that, kids, I mean, I could get emotional now. Seeing kids with Samsonite bags and, pushing carts, it really made you think, like I said, of like, I'm riding for kids that through no fault of their own and their families have found themselves in tough situations. And it felt really good. Took my mind off everything else, and it's really driven me this year to do another ride, to continue for the same charities and maybe a couple more. Keep the same name, but it'll be, hindsight's 2020. Look at what was and where we can go. So I'm going to try and knock that off in May or June or July, and bring it. So that's what it was. It was a personal journey, mate. But helping kids, I mean, just love it.
We'll put the link in the descriptions for on YouTube and on the podcast, so people can help with that cause, with the Steve Waugh Foundation and those other charities you mentioned. You mentioned CTE, and anyone who's we've had a year on Zoom, and we all know that unless for the free plans you get cut off. So I'm not gonna sort of ask a pile of questions. I'm just going to ask you to kind of outline your background in CTE. You've become something of a crusader now. We'll talk about topical. Stevie Ward, who plays for Leeds, he just retired 2 days ago as we're speaking, at the age of 27, because he'd been concussed and knocked out too many times. We're at the kind of real pointy end of this issue in sport, where people are questioning the future of body contact sport because of this issue. So I won't ask any tricky questions, Coops, about this. I'll just ask you to kind of outline your journey with this issue and this illness, and what you've learned and what lies ahead.
Yeah, look, mate. So the background is born in Queensland, born in Ipswich. Started playing footy at 6 for Darra State School, and I think that was the first time I remember being knocked out. We were playing at Nala, and we're on a dust bowl, I guess, and bare feet and shorts. And I remember being, I guess, tackled and slammed into the clay, a hard pack, and knocked out, and going home with a bad headache. And that's the first one that I know of. And then subsequently, over the years, there's just been multiple times that I've been knocked out. I started as a hooker with my footy and, around 12 or 13 playing serious football and a little bit of representative stuff, and knocked out a couple of times. The last one that was bad that I remember from footy was while playing for the Rats, number of concussions there and one knockout. But the worst knockout I had was high school, and Paul Dawson was our coach, and we were playing. I got tackled, running down the wing and didn't see it, and my head was slammed back into the ground. And I remember waking up on the sideline and him holding up his hand, and he's going, "How many fingers am I holding up?" And I said, "4, you idiot." And calling your teacher an idiot wasn't a good thing, I guess. And then he said, "Well, that's the right answer." And then he said, and what's the holiday next week? And I said, "That's another stupid question." I said, "It's Christmas, of course." It was Easter. Mm-hmm. And he said, "Yeah, you're not going anywhere." But I went home, that was 1976. Went to sleep, had a massive headache, did all the wrong things. We didn't know about protocols. I got knocked out playing cricket out here. I took a bounce at the side of the head up here in LA back in the early 90s, and just didn't think anything about it. And then subsequently, I got depression, I can talk about that now. I'm going to be a big advocate for it and talk about it. And it's one of the things that I'm talking to the docs, that the number of times that when they did the research and they've done some studies in my brain, there's a couple as a dark spot that shows a very traumatic experience, which they say could be one of those injuries, or it could be my back, which is another story. I just know that I sense things that I've read about with memory, thought process, things of those natures that really ring home for me. And before it gets too much further, I read the article that Chris Kinski had from the Concussion Legacy Foundation about rugby players in Australia and stuff. And I contacted him. I just said, you've got a missing link here. You're all about professionals that play for money and have relatively, short and long careers, but nothing like the Crusaders, the weekend Crusaders, the amateurs that play for the love of the game, be it rugby league or rugby union or soccer, that play into their 30s and 40s. And the number of games that they play and the knocks that they take, not just in the games themselves, but in training, significant. And when we talked through it, it made a lot of sense to him that there is an untapped resource for science to be able to get those people involved and donate. And I've done the same thing with my dad, who was in the military. He was artillery for 25 years. And back in the 60s and Vietnam and 70s and all that, they didn't wear, protection for their head. So the concussive effect of that compression of noise and sound for decades clearly had an issue with a number of them, including him. He suffers from some depression and PTSD. So I'm passionate about it, mate. It's and I'd go back and say this too. I wouldn't change one part of my life. I love my footy. I love the cricket. I love the camaraderie. I love the team work ethic of it. You're as strong as the weakest link. It's part of life, not just for our social environment, but I see it in the business world as well. The people that don't play team sports have a very different take on how they interact with people. And I love the physicality of it. It was an outlet for me. The Coops that sitting at a bar having a drink or on the beach having a chat with Richo versus the Coops that's got a ball in his hand that's opening the bowling. I've got a certain intent and it's not pleasant. And it's the same on the footy field. I'm going to leave everything out there. I'm going to tackle as hard as I can, as safely as I can, and run as hard as I can. But it's a physical outlet that I just loved it. but I'm very aware of it, and I'm concerned. I mean, because I look at it like today. I mean, if I had a son, I mean, I've got one daughter, but if I had a son, I'd want him to have that same experience. And I don't know, I have those concerns these days. I mean, I never wore headgear, but I'd wear it today. Protocols are different. I mean, we can't wrap ourselves in cotton wool and just take away things and become nanny states or environments where we change what we've all come to grow and love. I mean, NFL, they can't, that's not going to go away. Rugby union, rugby league, soccer, they're not going to go away. There's a story out here recently of a woman that talked about being concussed playing volleyball at a senior level in colleges, but she took a ball to the head that was spiked right at her. She got knocked out, and she's suffering as a result of it, and they're doing a little bit of study into that. So that's the reason, I got involved in it, mate. I just see it at my age, at 61, how things are playing out, and look back in retrospect and I want to contribute and help to make some changes that are positive, and not let things just run untethered, so to speak.
There's a couple of questions out of that, Allan. The first one I have is, we know with professional athletes that this leads to class actions, and the NFL have settled out of court with their players, and we know the rugby union I'm in Ireland now, I'm sit in this country, but in England the rugby union players are also taking legal action. But where does it lead for amateur sportsmen and women? What do they do?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's a tough question. I'm going to use my example because I can't speak for anybody else, but I chose voluntarily to play those games. I knew that there were issues involved. If I broke a leg or have a bad back injury, which have occurred from the game, that's my doing. It's my choice. I don't go out there and not understand the risks I'm taking. I don't think there's a place for amateurs to have class lawsuit actions. I think that going forward, obviously there's going to be waivers signed, there's going to be protocols in place for kids at sport. I just look at it as how we grew up in the 60s and the 70s. I mean, and as where it is today, I mean, I watch the parents around me here, kids have got to be tethered to a phone, and they're continually somewhat cotton wool wrapped, if you want. Whereas we were allowed to climb trees, run barefoot through the bush, don't step on a snake, stay out of the creeks, be home before it's dark. You got the same sort of mentality, I think, around amateur sports. It's like, we know what we're going to do, trust in what you do, but it's your decision ultimately. And, I don't think you can try and hold anybody else accountable. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not a place for litigation in my book.
Yeah. Yeah, because here, I mean, the great sort of contradiction, I guess, is that, you look at people who have suffered, from concussion and other injuries playing sport, and the sport provides their support, the community support for people, and sometimes financial support, and I personally think if this leads to, even though you said it won't happen, if body contact sport is found to be so dangerous that it should be banned or heavily modified, then that is just, so be it. That is just society. But it's different if you are the person who is actually drawing attention to this. So I might feel differently if I played 10 years of first grade and had earned $1 million. And then I was coming forward and saying, well, this is dangerous. And my action might lead to the end of that. So it might lead to nobody getting the opportunities that I got. How would I feel? You know what I mean? Like it's one thing for me to say it's a natural thing, it's going to happen. People will always take legal action because I'm an outsider, I'm observing it, but if I'm actually involved in it and I'm faced with a decision that might impact on the sport from which I benefited, I might feel a bit differently. And I just wondered how you feel about that, about the fact that these, rugby union players in the UK, and we're told there's going to be rugby league players soon who are bringing these class actions. They're 100% entitled to. They've been injured. Their lives have been affected, and you don't hold it against them. And it's not even worth saying, in my view, that you. But if you're in their shoes, do you take action that might endanger the very thing that nurtured and nourished you for a large portion of your life? And that's a kind of a bit of a contradiction there. How do you feel about that one?
Personally, mate, I don't believe in the retrospective viewpoint of it, that 20 years later, when we're educated as to what might have caused some issues, that you can go back and litigate. I don't want to see the sports curtailed. I believe it's an outlet for the people that want to play it. And let's be honest. I mean, I'm sitting here in America, and football's all about the NFL and college football. It's a very, very small percentage of the population that plays, because they don't have the infrastructure in place like we do in the UK and Europe and every other country around the world for post high school social team sports. Just doesn't exist. So you go to college, and if you're lucky enough to be one of the very small percentage there that make it, great. And even more so if you get picked up in the draft for the NFL. Rugby union the same way, rugby league the same way, soccer the same way. I mean, I think when you're talking about it now, and I'm trying to think back to the ages of these guys that are stepping up and doing this. They're in their 40s, I think. So, they clearly didn't make as much money as the players are today around the world. I understand it. When you ask the question like that, like, they've suffered financially, mentally. It's impacted their families, and that are they going to be the guys that lead the way, that look after themselves? I understand that, but I think there's got to be a line drawn here that you will create this divide and animosity in the sport, where even people like me, coming out and saying this. I mean, I've copped some shit from some people because of like, don't be talking about the concussion and CTE, and do you want to see the game go away, or do you want to see it change to the point that there's no physical contact? I'm just speaking up to bring awareness to it. I'm not sitting here going to go and chase people for money. But maybe there's protocols. Maybe that every league player, union player, has to wear headgear. That the protocols for concussion are strict and adhered to. I look back at some of the incidents this year in league in Australia with players that came and went with concussions, and same with union. They shouldn't have played, by the sound of it, in a few games after their concussions. So just ensuring that we're looking after the professional side of the game, but that also sets the standard for the club and the kids' footy. Because just like leadership here, do what I say, not what I do. And make sure that everybody's aware of the issues. It's a leadership issue, and it starts at the top. So I don't have the perfect answer, mate. I wish I did, but I don't.
But that's actually an interesting thing. Like Stevie Ward a generation ago definitely wouldn't have retired at 27. So, when you're saying, the dangers when you pick up a ball, well, we didn't know the dangers back then as well as we know them now. And if we don't talk about it, then we're concealing the dangers, and we're actually creating a situation where there is a dereliction of duty and cause for litigation. So that's why it is important to speak about it. Allan, congratulations on your fundraising over New Year's, and also on your work to bring attention to CTE and to this issue. Are there any sort of links or places people can go to learn more about these issues, or more about what you're doing?
Yeah, if they want to go to CCCC 2020, so double C, triple C 2020, that's the website that a couple of mates put up 24 hours notice for that ride that all occurred within 72 hours. There's links in there to all of those foundations that link direct to their donation pages. It's a little story of the ride, and it's going to be updated with some more photos and video, the article from the LA Times, and the next ride, which I think, like I said, is probably going to be in May. Thanks for the call, mate. It's great to see your face, and let's make 2020 a good one, and hope that the world gets some sanity and grows in the right way with all the right positive changes.
Well, I think we hope everyone's year is better than last year, but I think that particularly is the case for you, Allan, that you have a much better year. It's already started better because you're on white line fever. So we'll see you soon, mate, and I hope our next time we see it's in person.